This is a story from my own life. When I was about 7 or 8, I still hadn't learned to swim properly, so my dad used to take me to a swimming pool, a local pool, where every Saturday, about 6 of us, we put in the water and instructed from the side. The water was always clear, a kind of mist over it. It was fairly cold, the air. Getting into the water, I shivered. I didn't really want to be there. I pushed myself off the side and disappeared under the water. Big strokes. It felt safe. It felt safe. But then I needed to breathe, so I came up the top and started splashing around, trying to get the stroke. A voice said, "We swim on the top here, Mr. Ditchburn." And I looked over, and there was the instructor standing with my dad. And my dad didn't say anything, just pulled his specs down and shook his head. You see, my dad never really spoke to me when I was little. I was one of 4, 3 boys and a girl, and we all went about our different lives in, I guess, what was a happy and contented way. But I was always the one who wanted to please people. So come about the age of 16, my school offered anyone who wanted to enter the Oxbridge exams. They had a separate stream. They used to coach people to do this. Now my dad had been brought up in Workington. His dad was a docker, and his mum, we're not quite sure what she did. I think she was just a stay-at-home mum. But my dad escaped Workington by going to Oxford University. Teddy Hall. He was really proud of this. And I knew this. He would talk about it occasionally at Sunday lunches. So I decided I'd put myself forward for the Oxbridge exams. Trying to fathom out why the Labour Party were the breeding ground, why the unions were the breeding ground for the Labour Party, and why Russia became the place it was today, with young men who seemed to understand all this, completely flummoxed me and completely stressed me out. And after a few months of trying my best but never ever getting there, I decided to drop out. With a heavy heart, having told the school, I made my way home. I remember a dark, damp evening. I got home, and to my surprise, my dad was already home from work. We ran into each other in the corridor, and I looked at him, and I couldn't say anything. My head went down, and he looked at me over the top of his glasses and didn't say anything back to me. Because you see, my dad didn't speak to me. A few years later, in my early 20s, I decided to get married. In those days we got married rather than living with people like you do nowadays. I'd met a young woman, a double bass player, who was shy, but a right sort. She's here today. My dad agreed that he would provide all the wine for the wedding. And on the morning of the wedding, we couldn't find him anywhere. So we all got dressed up in our suits and things. We were having the wedding in my wife's house. The wedding in the church and the breakfast in my wife's house. And then someone said, "Dad's in the garage sorting the wine out." I went to the garage, which was on the side of the house, opened the door, and there he was. He was taking every cork out and smelling each bottle. The smell of wine drifting around the place. was amazing. He got some very fine wines. He looked up at me, smiled. I said, "All right, Dad?" And he just nodded. And I thought, he's going to say something. He's going to say something about me and my new wife-to-be and life stuff. But nothing happened. Nothing at all. Because you see, my dad never spoke to me. Not really. 3 years later, I was working in the centre of London and I got a phone call. "Your dad's dead. He's died on a train going to work of a heart attack." Silence. Then my mum phoned me and said, "Come down to Lewisham. I'm going to stay and see him. Please come." I remember sitting on the train. I was just 24. There were a few young kids just messing around, and I turned around and I thought, you know what? My dad has just died. And look at you, just playing. Don't you realise my dad's just died? But of course they didn't. Because life went on. We pulled into Lewisham and I made my way to the hospital, the old hospital there. Going down the corridors, the smell of urine and cabbage, to the mortuary. There was my mum, stoical as ever. She'd been a radiologist. She knew about hospitals. She knew about people going, people dying. A young man came in and said, "Would you like to see your father?" I looked at my mum and she said, "We would like to see him," which surprised me. Going into the mortuary room, there was a glass, and behind the glass there was someone lying in a suit, someone lying on his back. He had jowls. I thought, my dad's not got jowls. Is that my dad? And then we stood in silence. And my mum suddenly took my hand and said, you know he was proud of you." And in that moment, my dad had spoken to me. And I knew that if I ever had children, I would speak to them and tell them, if nothing else, that I love them.